Hello, this is Mark Hilliard from Beyond 20. Today I want to do a brief walkthrough of Chewell's approval engine. This is a very powerful automated process engine that actually stands alone in Chewell. It is not part of the normal automated processes in Chewell, but it does fire along with them using that particular service on your Chewell server. Approvals can be added to almost any object. They're primarily used for major objects such as change, knowledge, problem, and incident. Change is probably the most common place that people use approvals, but they can be added to other things. Service requests are frequently used. They frequently use approvals in order to get things done, such as, say, new hire creations or, change in salary if you're using the HR functionality within Chewell. But I just kind of want to walk through the basics of how approvals are created and how they are dispositioned within the system. So let's go ahead and if you see here, I'm actually in a blueprint. I'm going to select change request because it does have some built-in approvals that sort of help us understand the process a little bit better. And you'll see here where it says edit approvals right here on the structure side of the pane. If I were to select an object that did not have approvals associated with it, let's say for instance contract, you would see add approval support here, where I could in fact add support for approvals for that particular object. Obviously change by default does already have approvals built, so instead I have the edit approvals link here. When I open that up, you'll see I have 3 pre-built approvals that come out of the box. In the left pane, you'll see 2 selections. One is approvals, and that's what we're on right now. The other is an advanced tab. And what this tab does is it goes and finds the specific fields that are going to be used to create and modify approvals as we go through them. The relationship itself, in this case change request owns approvals, is the relationship we will use. What field on the parent, in this case the change, holds the description. The field that holds the ID of the selected approval. And the way that Chewell does approvals is they call them approval blocks. So as it goes through the workflow, it assigns a rec ID, one of the 42 character hex UIDs that Chewell uses. It assigns one to that approval process. That specific process gets its own UID, and it's stored in the approval block ID field on the change in this case, or whatever object you're utilizing. And then when do we generate the approvals? And you have the option of doing that when the trigger condition becomes true, and we'll see what that trigger condition looks like in a moment, or when the record is saved. Generally we use when the trigger condition is true as our generation point. There are some special cases where you may want to only create approvals upon save of the record. If we go back to our approvals set, again, we see all the approvals here. One thing you'll notice at the bottom is there's a checkbox to notify approver via email. You can choose to, when an approval gets created, notify them by email directly from this space, and you can build the email template from here, and it will always send out to the email address. And as you can see, there is a template already built for change, which shows all of the, basically shows the email template that's used if you choose to do that. We, as a general rule, do not use this. We actually build a separate automation process to generate the emails and send them out. A little bit easier to track, and that way we actually can do better troubleshooting if there is any sort of issue. And we can customize the emails per approval type. This, of course, would just send one email template for all approvals in this list. So let's take a look at the normal change implementation approval. Just take a look at the actual process here. First thing is that trigger condition we mentioned earlier. This is what has to be true for the system to generate approvals and to start the approval workflow or process. In this case, the change request show of hands field must be false. Implementation approved must be false. The submitted implementation approval must equal true, and the status must be approving. So those are just some basic expressions that we use to decide when we're going to trigger approvals. The behavior when the condition is no longer true, what do we do with the approval once this trigger condition no longer holds if we did create an approval? By and large, we usually just leave the approval there. But you could say clear the approvals. If this is no longer true, just take them out. And then the other one is to leave the approvals if the condition was changed by a block action. And those block actions appear here on the left, and we'll go over those in a moment. But what this basically means is if something outside of the approval engine made this statement no longer hold, we would just get rid of all the approvals. And there are occasions where that may actually be useful, but again, primarily we just leave the approvals there, and if we need to do something with them, as with the out-of-the-box change process, what we do is we move them into an approval history tab, which is a slightly different relationship within change. But we do that through a one step in the block actions at the end, rather than letting the approval engine make the decision for us. Second, we're going to go ahead and select the approvers. One thing to keep in mind with Chewell is within the approval engine, approvers must be licensed Chewell users, which means they must exist in the user info table. You cannot use customers from the customer table as approvers using the approval engine. We do have a separate video on how to create approvals using the customer table, and I do encourage you to watch that if you need to build approvals that are not being done by members of the user info table. However, just to get back to this, what you can do here is you can select approvers based on just strictly the name. So I could just say add a user straight up out of the system. I can add an entire team of approvers. You know, let's say I want everyone on the cab to be an approver. I can do that. I have the ability to use add users based on an expression, which means I could build an expression that comes up with a username that I want to add as an approver. And then finally, I can add users from a relationship. Now, Change uses that pretty frequently. As you can see, two of them here are done via relationship. And you can take a look at how that's done here. Change request links cab member. We build we figure out which relationship we're using, and then what is the rec ID of the user in that relationship. Now, keep in mind, of course, as we're adding these, we're not adding them by name, we're adding them by rec ID. Again, rec ID is a unique identifier, whereas name may not be. You may have 5 Mark Jones working for you and the licensed users in Chewell. So which one is the approver? Well, we do that by figuring it out from the rec ID, not the username. We can also add additional custom approval text. Now this, of course, goes into the approval itself. And then whether or not we also want to append the description. If we're using custom text, do we also append the change request description to the approval? We can also do that ourselves when we create the approval if we want to. And then also we can actually add a custom deadline, and then we have an action that we can take should that time run out. Up at the top, you'll see here the number of approvals that are required in order for this particular approval process to complete. In this case, they have a percentage of 50% must say yes. What that means is that if there are 9 approvers, 5 of those approvers must approve in order for it to move forward. Now, that also holds true on the other side. If there are 9 approvers, it takes 5 people declining or denying the approval for it to be denied. If I say I want all approvers in order to go by, then if just one person denies the approval, then the entire approval process is denied. Similarly, if I pick a specific number, say I say 4 people have to say yes, and there are 6 people in the approval process or in the approver list, if 3 people say no or deny, then it is denied. So just remember, when you're talking about how many are required for approval, the opposite is also true. When you need how many to deny would be the opposite number. So all approvers, again, 1 denial is a full denial. Percentage-wise, if you have a higher percentage of denials than you do approvals, if your denial percentage is higher than this percentage, then they're gonna deny the entire approval process. And then finally, we get to select what actions we take. And the 3 different possibilities are when the approval gets approved, when the approval is denied, or when that time runs out. Again, this is where we can set that custom deadline, and we can actually do something specific if time runs out. The three things we can do here, we can set a field value. In this case, we would set the status to implementing, and notice these are check boxes, not radio buttons, so these are cumulative. We do both of these things. Actually, all three of these will be true in an approval. So we set the field status to implementing. We could put it on a queue if we are using queues in the system. And we can also choose to run a one-step. In this case, there's an implementation approved one-step that we run in addition to setting the status to implementing. This last checkbox, executing the action, completes the approval process. Every record can have exactly one approval process associated with it. Even if you have multiple approval stages, as Change does out of the box, there is an assessment approval and then an implementation approval. That is all one approval process. So when we go through the assessment approval process, we don't check this box. We leave the approval process up and running until it goes through the implementation process, and then we complete the process. You cannot start a second approval process on any single record in Chewell. Now again, when denied, we have the ability to set the field status to denied, and we run a one-step to deny the implementation. Now in this case, as you see, we're not executing the completion of the approval process here because we want them to have the opportunity to resubmit and go through the process again. So we're not going to end the process here. We're going to wait for them to go through. Now at some point somebody may say, okay, no, this is denied. We're going to close the change, and that's fine. That will end the approval process effectively as well, because the change record itself will have been closed. But we don't want to just shut down the approval process when we do a denial, because we want to have the opportunity to resubmit the same ticket or the same record for approval for a second time. Finally, of course, when time runs out, we can set things there as well. Oftentimes we don't set this. Approvals, we don't put a time limit on approvals. They just get done when they get done. That is essentially the entire approval process, and I hope that this has been somewhat helpful to you going forward. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to us at our website, www.beyond20.com. And please, as always, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond 20 LLC. Thank you.